want to start today with a ghost story.
Oh? Okay.
But not, the kind with rattling chains or Victorian mansions or things that go bump in the night.
Right.
This is a ghost story that's written in chemistry right inside your own cells. It's about this uncomfortable but fascinating reality that what you think of as human isn't entirely human.
That's a perfect place to start. Because for the longest time, we told ourselves this really tidy, very egocentric story that Homo sapiens came out of Africa, we were smarter, we were better, we replaced everyone else, and that was that. We were the solo act on the stage.
Right, the replacement theory. We came, we saw, we conquered, but then 2010 happened.
2010 was the earthquake. We finally sequenced the Neanderthal genome, and suddenly that solo act became, well, more like a messy group project.
And we got this baseline fact that just changed everything.
It changed anthropology forever. The fact that non-African modern humans carry roughly 2% Neanderthal DNA.
Which, on the surface, 2% sounds like a rounding error.
It does.
But when you think about billions of people, that is a massive amount of archaic genetic material. Walking around, buying groceries, listening to our deep dive right now.
Exactly. And we know this dates back to a primary encounter, a sort of first date, if you will, roughly 50,000 to 65,000 years ago, probably in the Near East, just as our ancestors were stepping out of Africa.
So we have this baseline. Everyone outside of Africa has this little souvenir from that first meeting. But here's the mystery, and this is what we're really unpacking today.
Right.
If we all came from that same migration, that same initial group that, met the Neanderthals, you'd expect the amount of Neanderthal DNA to be the same in everyone, wouldn't you? Like, we all split the inheritance evenly.
Logically, yes. If it was just one event, one meeting, then yeah, the genetic inheritance should be pretty uniform across Eurasia.
But it's not.
No, not at all. And that is the central puzzle. When you look at the data, East Asians consistently have roughly 20% more Neanderthal ancestry than Europeans.
And that is a huge difference. 20% is definitely not a rounding error.
No.
So our mission today is to figure out why. Why the split? We've got 3 competing theories to get into. Selection, dilution, and multiple pulses. And then we're going to look at what that ancient DNA is actually doing in us. Because it's not just sitting there like junk in the attic.
Far from it. It's shaping everything from the thickness of your hair to how your body handles COVID-19.
All right, let's get into it. The discrepancy. Theory number 1 is what I like to call the cleanup crew.
Or, to use the slightly drier term, purifying selection.
Right. So the intuitive thought here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe East Asians just held on to the DNA better? Like they were better at keeping it for some reason?
You actually have to flip that thinking completely. It's not about who kept it. It's about who was better at throwing it away.
Okay.
You have to understand, a lot of this Neanderthal DNA wasn't necessarily a prize. A lot of it was what geneticists call deleterious.
So, slightly harmful.
Yeah, slightly harmful to our system. I mean, we are different species. Their code didn't always run smoothly on our operating system.
Okay, so natural selection acts as this cleanup crew, trying to scrub the bad bits out of the genome over generations.
Exactly. But here's the catch, and this is where it gets a little counterintuitive. The efficiency of that cleanup crew depends almost entirely on the size of the population.
Ah, effective population size. This is a concept that always gets me. Why does the size of the crowd matter?
It's a great question. Think of it like a job market. Imagine a massive, bustling city, let's say modern-day New York.
Okay.
That's the ancestral European population in this analogy. It was historically larger. And in a huge city, competition is fierce. If you're a worker with a flaw, you show up late, you're bad at math, you just aren't getting hired.
Because there are 1,000 other people ready to take your spot.
Precisely. The market is efficient enough to weed you out. A large population means high competition, so bad genes get fired fast. Selection is strict.
Got it. So now contrast that with the ancestors of East Asia.
They went through what we call a bottleneck. So now imagine a small, isolated town with only 50 people.
The small town scenario.
Right. In that small town, the boss needs to hire someone. You might be late, you might be bad at math, but you're the only person there. You get the job.
So because the group was smaller, luck just took over.
We call it genetic drift. In small populations, random chance luck can overpower skill or selection. The cleanup crew is just understaffed. So slightly harmful Neanderthal bits can hitchhike along and stay in the gene pool simply because there weren't enough people for them to get weeded out.
So the theory is Europeans were the big city, ruthlessly efficient at scrubbing Neanderthal DNA. East Asians were the small town, and the bottleneck meant the DNA just stuck around by accident.
That was the leading idea for a long time. And it makes sense on paper. But science is all about testing the math.
Yeah.
And when researchers, specifically Vernot and Akey, ran computer simulations of this, they found a problem.
The math didn't check out.
It's real, and it definitely happened. But it isn't strong enough to explain a massive 20% gap on its own. The cleanup crew contributes, for sure, but it can't explain the whole mess.
Okay, so we need another suspect. Enter theory number 2. This one feels like a plot twist. The ghost ingredient.
The dilution model, yes.
Yeah.
This one is fascinating because it forces us to completely rethink the map of human migration. It involves a population we call basal Eurasians.
Basal Eurasians. Who were they, and why do you call them a ghost population?
Well, we call them ghosts because we don't have any of their direct fossils, but we can see their shadow in the genetics of people today.
Interesting.
So here's the scenario. Imagine a group of modern humans leaves Africa, but instead of marching north or east, they sort of hang back.
They lingered in the lobby.
Exactly. They likely stayed somewhere in North Africa or the Middle East, isolated. And crucially, they stayed there before the other groups met the Neanderthals.
So these basal Eurasians were, in this context, pure Homo sapiens. They had 0 Neanderthal DNA. Okay, so how does this group of pure humans mess up the numbers between Europe and Asia?
You have to fast forward thousands of years. Europe is settled by Paleolithic hunter-gatherers, these rugged folks with high levels of Neanderthal DNA.
Right.
But then the agricultural revolution happens, and you get this massive wave of early Neolithic farmers moving into Europe from the Near East.
And let me guess, these farmers were descendants of those basal Eurasians.
That's it. They were the ghosts coming out of isolation. And they carried very little to no Neanderthal DNA. So when they moved into Europe and mixed with the locals, they watered down the gene pool.
I love the analogy the sources use here, the milk and coffee one.
It's the perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
So imagine the European hunter-gatherers are a cup of strong black espresso, high Neanderthal content.
Got it. Strong coffee.
Then you pour in a mass amount of milk, that's the Neolithic farmers, the basal Eurasians, with no Neanderthal DNA.
And what happens?
When you mix it, the coffee gets lighter. The overall concentration of coffee or Neanderthal DNA drops.
So Europeans are the latte in this scenario. They got diluted.
Precisely. And the key is that East Asians did not experience this specific wave of dilution. Their coffee stayed stronger because nobody poured that specific milk into their cup.
That makes a ton of sense. So it's not that East Asians gained more, it's that Europeans lost some because a new group moved in and watered it down. Case closed.
Well, not quite. The dilution model is great at explaining why European levels dropped. But some scientists argue it doesn't fully explain why the East Asian levels are so high.
Which brings us to theory number 3, the second helping.
Or the multiple pulse theory.
This one suggests that maybe it wasn't just one first date in the Near East.
Right, the 2-pulse model. Pulse 1 happens in the Near East, everyone gets that. But this theory suggests that after the European and Asian populations split, the ancestors of East Asians met Neanderthals again. A second date, likely somewhere in Siberia or East Asia.
But how can we possibly prove a second date happened 40,000 years ago? There are no diary entries.
We have something better. We have the length of the DNA segments themselves. And this is where we have to talk about the Isushim individual.
The 45,000-year-old fossil from Siberia.
Yes. His genome gave us a way to measure time. Think of DNA recombination like shuffling a deck of cards.
Okay, I like cards.
So imagine a brand new deck and all the hearts are in perfect order, ace through king. That long run of hearts represents a segment of Neanderthal DNA right after a mating event. It's long, it's continuous.
Fresh.
Very fresh. Now, every time you have a child, every generation, you shuffle the deck, you cut it, you mix it. What happens to that nice long run of hearts?
It gets broken up. The more you shuffle, the shorter the runs of hearts get. They become scattered.
Exactly. We call this LIS average length of intergressed sequences. Long segments mean the deck hasn't been shuffled much, so the mating was recent. Short, confetti-like segments mean it happened ages and ages ago.
So when they looked at the Isushim guy,
his Neanderthal segments were remarkably long, much longer than what we see in people today. It proved that his ancestors had mated with Neanderthals pretty recently. And when we apply this same math to modern East Asians, the pattern suggests there just had to be a second pulse, a top-up of Neanderthal DNA that Europeans missed.
So, to sum up the mystery, It's probably a combination of things.
Most likely.
Europeans got diluted by that wave of farmers, the milk and the coffee, and East Asians probably got a second helping when they met Neanderthals again in the East.
That's the consensus that's emerging. It's not a straight line. It's a tangled tree, a braided stream of populations coming together and pulling apart.
Okay, so that's the how. But I really want to pivot to the so what, because this isn't just ancient history. This DNA is actively building our bodies right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's not junk DNA at all. A lot of it has been preserved specifically because it helped us survive.
Let's start with the stuff we can see. Skin and hair.
Right. We see two really interesting genes here. In Europeans, about 70% carry a Neanderthal allele called BNC2. In East Asians, about 66% carry a different one, POU2F3.
And what do these do?
They're related to skin pigmentation and to keratin, the protein that makes up your hair and your nails. You have to remember, our ancestors were tropical. They were adapted for the African sun.
And then suddenly they're in Eurasia, where it's colder, darker, less UV.
Right. They needed to adapt and fast. Waiting for a random mutation to give you lighter skin could take thousands of years. But mating with a Neanderthal, that's like an instant software upgrade. We basically borrowed their winter coat.
We stole their survival gear. That's incredibly efficient. But the one that really blew my mind was the immune system story, the resurrection.
Ah, the OAS locus.
Yeah.
This is one of the most dramatic examples of what we call adaptive integration.
So walk us through it. The sources say we actually lost a gene.
Yes. On the OAS gene cluster, which is crucial for your innate immunity, your body's first line of defense against viruses, modern humans essentially broke one of their own tools. When we left Africa, we carried a variant that was less effective.
That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. You're entering a new continent full of new germs and you just dropped your shield.
Pretty much. But the Neanderthals had been in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had the ancestral splice variant, the good version. They had kept the shield.
So when we interbred with them,
We got it back. We resurrected our own lost function. That Neanderthal DNA encodes a more active protein that helps us detect and destroy viruses. It very likely saved millions of lives in those early migrations.
that sounds heroic. Neanderthal DNA saving the day. But there's always a flip side, isn't there? The sources talk about a double-edged sword.
There's always a trade-off. Evolution is brutal. It only cares if you survive long enough to have kids. It doesn't care at all if you have back pain at 40 or heart disease at 60.
And the starkest example of this is something we're all, unfortunately, very familiar with now. COVID-19.
It is. This was a major finding. We all know the virus uses the ACE2 receptor to get into our cells. But scientists found that the DPP4 gene also plays a role. And specifically, variants of that DPP4 gene that were inherited from Neanderthals act like a second door.
A second door. So if you have this Neanderthal gene, you're basically leaving the back door unlocked for the virus to get in.
In a way, yes. It makes it easier for the virus to enter your cells.
Wow. That is a grim irony. The same type of DNA that might have helped us fight ancient pathogens 40,000 years ago is making us more susceptible to severe COVID today.
That's the price of our history. What protected you in the Stone Age might be a liability in the modern age.
And it's not just viruses?
No, we see it in reproductive health, too.
Yeah.
There's a segment on chromosome 2 from archaic ancestors that's actually protective against prostate cancer.
Okay, that's a win.
A big win. But then you have other archaic variants that are linked to things like preeclampsia and other reproductive issues. It's a really complex legacy. We're a patchwork of helpful and harmful traits.
It's just fascinating how deep it goes. It's not just soft tissue either. It's the literal shape of our heads.
The skull shape, yes.
Yeah.
This brings us to the TBX1 gene. And usually we talk about genes making proteins, but this is about a regulatory variant.
Okay, let's break that down. What's a regulatory variant?
Think of it like a dimmer switch on a wall. The gene is the light bulb. The regulatory variant is the switch. It doesn't change the bulb itself. It changes how bright it shines or when it turns on and off.
Okay, so I got a Neanderthal dimmer switch for our TBX1 gene. What does it do?
It affects the morphology, the shape of your skull base and your vertebrae. It contributes to the specific way our heads sit on our necks. It highlights something crucial. Evolution isn't just about making new parts. It's about tweaking the settings on the parts you already have.
So the Neanderthal DNA is acting as a different set of instructions for our own genes.
A different set of settings, exactly.
I want to zoom out for a second. We focus so much on Neanderthals, they're the famous ones. But they weren't the only ghosts in the machine, were they? We have to mention the other cousin.
The Denisovans, yes, absolutely. You cannot tell the human story without them.
They seem even more mysterious. All we have is what, a finger bone and a couple of teeth?
Physically, we have almost nothing. a few scraps from a cave in Siberia. But genetically, they are titans. Their impact is massive, especially for populations in Oceania and Papua New Guinea. They carry 4 to 6% Denisovan DNA.
And the most famous example of their legacy is the high-altitude adaptation, right? With the Sherpas.
The EPAS1 gene. This is a classic textbook example of getting superpowered DNA. Tibetans live at altitudes where oxygen is incredibly thin. Most of us lowlanders would get altitude sickness. Our blood would get thick and sludgy trying to compensate.
But Tibetans don't have that problem.
No, because they carry a Denisovan version of EPAS1 that regulates their hemoglobin production perfectly. It keeps their blood thin and efficient, even at 14,000 feet.
So again, borrowing the local adaptation, the Denisovans lived in Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They had already solved the oxygen problem.
Exactly. We arrived, we mixed, and we took the shortcut. And the research is getting even more specific. There are new findings from Papua New Guinea that show different Denisovan haplotypes affecting immune response in the lowlanders versus genes related to brain development in the highlanders. It suggests the Denisovans themselves were incredibly diverse.
It really changes how you view human history. It's not this straight line of us versus them. It's not a tree with neat, distinct branches.
That's the metaphor that paleoanthropologists are really moving away from. The tree of life is a bit misleading for our story. It's much more like a braided stream.
A braided stream. I like that.
Yeah, populations split, they flow apart, they evolve on their own for a while, and then they merge back together. Admixture, dilution, selection, it's all happening at once, over and over.
And when you look at the final numbers, it's kind of humbling, maybe even a little disturbing for our egos.
It is. When you strip away the Neanderthal DNA, the Denisovan DNA, and all the deep shared ancestry we have with other apes, recent studies suggest that only 1.5 to 7% of the modern human genome is uniquely, purely human.
That is just wild. Let that sink in for a second. 93 to 98.5% of our software is shared or borrowed or just ancient. The part that makes us, the unique upgrade, is a tiny fraction of the code.
We're a mosaic. We are walking museums of the species we survived.
So what does all this mean for you, listening right now? When you look in the mirror, what should you see?
You should see a survivor. But you should also realize that humanity isn't some walled garden. We're porous. Our immune systems, the texture of our hair, the shape of our skull, our vulnerability to a modern pandemic, these are legacies of species we thought we drove to extinction.
But in a very real sense, they didn't go extinct at all.
No. They live on inside every one of us. Every time you take a breath at high altitude or your body fights off a flu virus, you might just be using a tool they built for you 50,000 years ago.
And I want to leave everyone with a thought. If we're carrying around the ghosts of Neanderthals and Denisovans, and we know there were other ghost populations like the basal Eurasians, what else is hiding in that 98% of shared DNA? What other ghosts are influencing how we think or feel right now that we just haven't identified yet?
That's the next frontier.
Yeah.
We've found the big ones. Now we have to find the whispers.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.